Hi everyone, thank you very much. So very excited to be here. So essentially, when you look at how people measure AMM performance, it's really confusing. You hear the words training APY, boosted token emissions, impermanent loss. It's really hard, even for power DeFi users, to really understand what they're getting and the risks they're taking. And what's confusing for the DeFi power users is even more confusing for the new users that we want to onboard into DeFi. And so that's a real barrier that makes it fuzzy and difficult for those users to be onboarded into crypto. So I believe that is key for an industry to better apprehend the way that performances in AMMs are measured and better understand the risks that we face. And this is key because AMMs are one of the biggest DeFi primitives with 17 billion TVL locked today. I think LSDs are at par right now. So today what I want to do is first reflect on why AMMs are so cool, and it's critical to maybe have more information and more clarity on how to analyze their performances. Second, I will deep dive on a framework to better understand how to analyze performances. And last but not least, I will introduce the results of a simulator that we've built at Swap, the company that I'm the co-founder, that essentially allows us to bring clarity to this topic. And I will share with you the learnings from this study. So maybe just quick refresher, like why I think personally that AMMs are amazing and they solve a lot of problems, and that's why it's key to really understand how they perform to have full clarity on their design and better innovate there. So first, AMMs are accessible to anyone, of course. Anyone can LP, can trade. This is very interesting because when you compare to the equivalent, the TradFi equivalent of AMMs, which is market-making funds, those funds are only accessible to the best connected and the richest LPs. You have to have significant size to be able to LP into a market-making fund and have the right connections. Second, they are transparent. It's very easy to audit the yield that is done by an AMM and to understand how the yield is done. This is key also because it avoids some of the terrible catastrophes that happen in our industry and also in TradFi. Examples of that encompass Cyrile's capital, which was essentially borrowing UST and Luna, taking some leverage on UST and Luna without telling its LPs. Alameda, of course, which was playing with the funds from the FTX customers, and Bernard Madoff, who was delivering 12% yields to its investors by using the funds of the inflows of the LPs. AMMs, of course, are non-custodial, and I think I don't need to remind you why this is key. And I think one of their very interesting properties that we are just starting to touch is the interoperability of the LP tokens, which enables to maximize capital efficiency. Essentially, the capital that you have into an AMM is not locked like it would be in a traditional fund. It can be used in other protocols. So, for instance, borrowing against it in the lending protocol, minting a stablecoin, etc. In terms of drawbacks, I think the first thing that is, as I mentioned, which is key, is to understand, okay, how can we assess their performances? Because it seems that there's no clarity on the market on whether those AMMs are really profitable for LPs or not, and which risks you are taking. And another drawback comes with the proliferation of concentrated AMMs, is that sophistication is required for such designs. So, as I said today, let's focus on the performances, which to me is, AMMs kind of tick all the boxes in terms of a great infrastructure and solution to provide security, transparency, and efficiency of the capital for market making. There's just this performance issue that we need to sort out. So how can we assess financial performance? I think this is very important to reflect on that, and this is something that is not done very well in crypto today. So as an investor, you want to assess two things. First, the returns, and second, the risk. The returns is pretty straightforward. It's the average return that you can make on a year if you do like the investment 1,000 times, for instance. The return should be net. There's no such thing as, okay, trading APY, impermanent loss, whatever. Trading APY doesn't mean anything. What's important is you have what you have in the beginning of the year and what you have at the end of the year and the average of this return. And this is the only thing that you should measure. Returns, I mean, I think in crypto we tend to focus on returns, but we should not forget risks. Risks are very important. Risk are a bit trickier to measure than returns. You probably need several indicators, one of which is the variability of the return. So for instance, if like you have an investment that is giving you a 5% yield every year, it's of course less risky than an investment that is giving you 30%, then -10, then 20%, whatever. Another good indicator is the stress test. So what's the maximum loss that you can expect from an investment in a stress scenario? Then the big question is, so yeah, just to come back on the risk, why is risk important? Is because a stable investment is worth much more than a risk investment. Essentially, with a stable cash flow, you're able, for instance, to borrow. Your bank, for instance, can give you a credit for your home if you have a stable salary, because it's easy to predict your cash flows, and so it can anticipate that. Also, it's better for financial planning. If you know that you want to buy a house in 2 years, of course you'd rather have a safe investment than a risky one. So a safe investment is worth more than a risky one. The second question is around the benchmark. So I would say for AMMs, the best benchmark is probably HODL. So you want to compare your returns and your risk to as if you were hodling the tokens that you deposited into the AMM. But that can vary depending on your objective. And then the question that I would like to address today is the methodology. So my conviction is that we should mix two approaches in order to understand the performances of an investment and the risks. First, realized data, and second, simulated data. So realized data, of course, is very interesting because it enables you to see what actually happens, right? The main issue with realized data is that in real life, only one of the multiple scenarios that could have happened happens. So let me give you a very concrete example. Until April 22, you could see UST as a perfectly stable coin. With realized data, you would have had no chances to anticipate that it would just go to zero. So realized data can be a poor predictor of market events because it shows only what happened in the past. And the past does not necessarily reflect what's going to happen in the future. So that's why I believe that it is key to add simulated data to complement the approach. Simulated data, of course, are not perfect because there are some things that you cannot modelize and that you cannot anticipate, but they help you to modelize stress scenarios and understand what can happen, especially if you have a limited subset of data. One of the issues that we have in DeFi is that we're a very young industry. DeFi is maybe like 3 years old, DeFi summer, maybe, 6 years old max. And it's a very small subset of data. So that's why I believe that simulated data is key to assess financial performances and risks. So regarding AMMs, what can we see from both approaches? So first, if we look at realized performances, we see that they are heavily in the red, unfortunately. So a report by Bancor approximately 2 years ago showed that 50% of LPs report negative performances on UniV3. you're going to tell me, okay, Bancor is a competitor of Uniswap. They obviously cheated on their report. Well, another study made by Scimitar Capital, which was actually later confirmed indirectly by the Uniswap team, showed that LPs in UniV3 had a negative unrealized P&L of 100 million. So yeah, I would say so that's only on the ETH USDC 5 basis point pool, but I think this basically shows a trend there that overall LPs on Uniswap v3 are probably losing money. So then what can we see from simulated data? And that's where the AMM simulator comes. So at Swap, we invest heavily on research. We've partnered with mathematicians and researchers in market making that come from TradFi, and we've developed with them a simulator that enables us to test any AMM strategy in thousands of market conditions, turning the 3-4 years of data that we have in DeFi into 1,000 years. So how does the simulator work? Essentially, we have some inputs which encompass thousands of market conditions, so different price trajectory. And then we input a trading demand. So the trading demand are essentially hypotheses around the size and the frequency of trades that happen during the time period that we measure. And essentially, by using those inputs, we're able to test AMM strategies across thousands of market conditions. So how does it work concretely? So basically, we have this kind of matrix where we run, let's say, 1,000 runs. Each time we do a run, we look at the return of the AMM strategy against HODL. So then we compute the average of the return, and this is the dimension that you can see here, which is like the return axis. And then we measure the variability of the return, which is the risk dimension, right? So essentially, what that means is that you can define then several zones in this chart, right? You have the we're gonna make it zone, which is on the top left corner, so high return, low variability. And you have the gambling zone, which is the zone where you're at the casino, right? When you have a negative return and super high risk. In other words, you can make a lot of money, but you have more chances to lose a lot of money. So what does that teach us? Well, unfortunately, it seems that current traditional AMMs have returns that are more casino-like than investment-like. So what you can see here are various implementations of UniV2 and Curve with different parameters. So on UniV2, those are the fee parameters, and on Curve, those are like more like the parameters of that are used in the Curve internal pricing model. This is only for assets that are uncorrelated, not for stablecoins. And what we can see is that, unfortunately, UniV2 and Curve are in the gambling zone. Another very interesting learning is that if we implement an approach which relies only on oracles, and that adds fees on top of that, we can see that actually just introducing an oracle significantly improves the results of these AMM strategies. So that's also a very interesting result, because here we only added an oracle. We did not do any complicated math or whatever, so there is significant room for improvement. Then I have a good news, actually, is that we actually found an efficient model thanks to this simulator. So what you can see, the dots that you can see here are two models. So first, Swap v1, which is a product that has already been live for approximately a year on Polygon. And then a new model that we found, which is called Swap v2, and which, so those are the yellow dots that you can see here, for which we have various risk parameters, and that allow us to get much more yield than the current Swap v1 product, which is essentially, as you can see, a very low risk, very low return pool. So how does this model work, actually? So it's a model that uses the most advanced market-making models that you can find in TradFi, and adapts them to the infrastructure of DeFi. So our models uses different parameters. So first, hypotheses that are based on on-chain analysis with like the trade's frequency and size, the trader's demand sensitivity, and the evolution of the prices. And it also includes a risk component. Essentially, we can tailor the aggressiveness of the model to decide to either like go for a more like high risk, high return strategy or low risk, low return strategy. So the model uses all of those parameters to maximize the PNL of LP into the AMM minus HODL. So it's aimed at outperforming HODL, essentially. And what it acts mainly is on the fees. So essentially, we modify the spread of the asset pair with two elements. First, we increase fees when there is high volatility on the market, because it's more risky as a market maker to quote prices when the volatility is high. And the second thing is the model also acts on the reserves to ensure that when there is an imbalance compared to HODL, it's being put back to balance and reduces fees to give incentives to people to rebalance it, essentially. This model also uses, so essentially price feeds. It relies on like oracles, essentially. And we also innovate on the architecture side to maximize the performance of our model. So essentially, what we found is that by implementing an architecture which is hybrid, you can actually benefit from the security, the transparency, the composability, and the accessibility that you can find on-chain with the performances that you can find off-chain in terms of latency, of data feeds, for instance. So our new architecture relies on a hybrid implementation where the liquidity pools are on-chain. So this is non-custodial. You just deposit the liquidity into public pools. And then you have another module, which is a quotes module, which is done partially off-chain. So the trade quotes are generated off-chain using the complex models that I just shared. This enables us to have access to super fast price data and compute like harsh computations, essentially. The quotes are then verified on-chain to ensure that they don't rug the LPs or that a dysfunctioning of the backend cannot hurt the LPs. And the last thing is all the trade settlement is done on-chain. So there is no, essentially you get kind of the best of both worlds, the performance of the off-chain with the security and the transparency of the on-chain. So actually we're launching this, so yeah, our V1 had, as I described, was a like really low risk, low return product. It was a BTC ETH USDC pool that launched approximately a year ago on Polygon, which had 0.1% in impermanent loss, a net yield around 1.5%. And yeah, essentially with V2, with this new infrastructure and those new equations, we think that we can strongly improve that. We're going to launch actually in approximately 1 month. We're running a whitelist program actually to test the products. Thanks to the whitelist, you can also have access to exclusive benefits. So if you want to try it, don't hesitate to flash this code, and join the whitelist.
All right, now it's time for a few audience questions. Let's see, one over there.
Hi, perhaps an unfriendly question, but is it not similar to running an arbitrage bot, basically, which then kind of rewards the LPs? Because like the off-chain infrastructure probably has to know the prices of the assets in all the other venues and then somehow process it and then push it on-chain. Is that not how it works?
So I'm not familiar with exactly how like the Flashbot infrastructure works, but I don't think it's similar. Arbitrage? No, it's not. It does not rely on arbitrage. It's just like purely like so essentially the prices of the other venues like they are more computed at a meta level, not on the instant level. by the trading demand function, essentially. So by modelizing and analyzing the trading demand function, you are able to understand, okay, what are the dynamics of pricing in other venues, so that the quotes are tailored to be maximizing the P&L for LPs. But it does not rely on arbitrage. It's not a module that we have added for now. It could be in the future.
So you mentioned that you benchmarked the model against holding the assets, and you also had the statistics that 50% of the liquidity pools have negative P&L. Have you modified that, or not modified the number, but have you benchmarked that historical performance against holding, and how does that change it? Because is it 50% negative P&L, or if you benchmark that historical data against holding, does it change to better or worse?
So to be honest, we haven't like converted the numbers of the simulator into like this specific KPI of like number of people in the red. I think I would expect it to be higher than 50%, given what we see is that the returns on average are negative.
Hey, thanks. So your simulation and then this AMM proposal, like whatever your version of instead of the constant function, whatever you guys are using, it seems like this is specifically for the largest tokens. So the most liquidity, multiple, very deep pools. This is true, right? Like this doesn't really
Totally true, yeah.
Doesn't really seem like it's for shitcoins or any like the vast majority of alts even.
So essentially, what one needs to understand is that if you don't have private information, it's impossible to be a profitable market maker for shitcoins. Because essentially, in general, in financial markets, you always lose against someone who is better informed than you. And that's also one of the big reasons why AMMs are not profitable, is because they don't rely on any external data, and they just pay arbitrageurs to give them those information points. So if you start trading like market making shitcoins without private information, which is illegal, by the way, to trade with private information, but if you do that, you're essentially trading always against insiders, because usually people who hold shitcoins are mostly insiders. So it's very unlikely to be profitable for such assets, or you would have to put very large spreads.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Coming to the risk, I have a question. Of course, there is an impermanent loss, but when we coming to the worst scenario, for example, I'm putting liquidity into Uniswap LP, and the pool gets wrecked. So what is the percentage of this? It can happen, basically, in your eyes, or like if you calculate it, assessing the risk reward of the strategies.
So not sure. So what you mean is like, what are the risks besides the financial risk of the strategy, or?
No, exactly. If you calculated what is the percentage risk of pool get wrecked, for example, a ETH USD on the Uniswap.
Of a rug of the pool? Well, I think, so on Uniswap, I think this never happened, like a rug of a pool, like it's not possible in the smart contract. Here, what we measure in this presentation is only the financial risk of the strategy. So it's really about, okay, depending on the evolution of the prices and given like the formulas that are used by Curve, by Uniswap, etc., what are the financial risks? But you're right, there are other risks that you take when you're an LP. You face a smart contract risk, you face maybe a rug risk or whatever, which I think to me is kind of similar to the smart contract risk, but those are not measured here in this presentation.
Awesome, thank you so much. A big round of applause for Cyrille.